Hello, my name's Ed Poole. I'm a member of the Green Party, and we currently have our national executive elections, and I'm speaking to candidates for the various different positions. Today, I'm speaking to Hannah Spencer, who is standing to be local party support coordinator. Yes, that's right. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Why did you join the Green Party, and why do you think other people should?
If I think back sort of throughout my life, I've always tried to do different things that ultimately address some of the inequalities in the world, whether that's volunteering or even things like my job. For those who don't know, I'm a plumber, and it's an industry that there is very, very few women in. So putting my time into things that I think might help address some of the inequalities. Never was political, particularly until COVID, when the pandemic hit. And I realised at that point it was so obvious that a lot of the things that were happening to us were as a result of politics and politicians mainly looking after themselves, while the rest of us were really trying to muck in, keep each other safe, keep the world turning. There was a select few and who just seemed to be either getting away with things, as we found out later, or getting wealthier off the back of it. And we saw that gap grow even wider between those who've got a lot and those who've not got very much. And I saw then that that pattern is just replicated all the time, and it's going to happen again as the climate crisis deepens. Like, that inequality is going to get worse because those of us that have got a bit less are the ones who end up taking the hit, really, and those that are some of the wealthiest people in society always seem to do okay. And I thought, actually, if we had a different set of people in politics making those decisions, people who look like us and sound like us, maybe things would be a bit different. So I wanted to get more involved. I joined the Greens for loads of different reasons. One of the big things is because our policy is made by us as members. So there were things that I wasn't that sure about. And I thought, well, that's okay because we can change those. And I'm a big believer in no political party is perfect. I think you've got to kind of, that phrase of you've got to get on the bus that takes you the closest to where you're going. But the last thing was actually that Greens were winning. And when I contacted my local party before I even became a member, it was just to get involved. And, a month after I got involved with the elections and we won. So I was like, actually, this is something that if I can put my time into, I'm going to get something out of it. And so that was really important to me too. It didn't just seem like a party of well-meaning people who would just daydream. It was like this group of people who want change and are actually going out and getting it. So that's why I decided to join the Greens. And I'd urge anybody who is feeling like I was, quite upset, quite angry, quite lost and unsure about what's going to happen, to join the Green Party, to get on board with us and help build this movement that is starting.
What do you think of the Green Party electoral strategy known as Target to Win?
I think it's hard to deny its success. I think that's really clear that it's been a really good way of helping us to roll out a strategy that has seen us get a huge increase in councillors across England and Wales. I think, like anything, you kind of have to leave some bits to the imagination too. You've got to be a bit flexible. It's brilliant to use it as the main like guide to what you're doing, but I think you've got to be willing to deviate sometimes when it feels right, and especially to keep things varied, to try and attract new members, and just to make things a bit fun and have a go at trying new things. And I often find that I know when I joined, I had loads of ideas that weren't in target to win and that maybe it wouldn't have worked, but that enthusiasm that I had was a big thing that I was bringing. And you see that across the party, like new people come, whether they're new to politics or from a different party, that enthusiasm, that energy that they're bringing, we need to do something with. And sometimes that doesn't always fit into target to win. Sometimes it needs to be channeled into other ways. So I think we need to bear that in mind when we're thinking about how we use target to win. And target to win is always developing. Like, the version that we've got now isn't the version that came out, because people have tried and tweaked and done different things and worked out what works and what doesn't. And I think the role that I've gone for on GPEX, the local party support role, is because I spend quite a lot of my time traveling around to a lot of different local parties. And so it's interesting to see and learn like how they interpret target to win and what they're doing and which bits they do and which they don't do. And it'd be really good to be able to feed that back directly onto GPEX to say, this is what local parties are telling us and this is what we need to listen to. So broadly, I think it's a really good thing. I think it definitely works, but I think there's always got to be a bit of room for a bit of creativity and a bit of fun.
What's your feelings on electoral pacts?
Not keen, if I'm honest. I think it would have to be something quite amazing in terms of the benefits it would bring for me to be convinced that it's a good idea. I'd always be open-minded. However, I'm sort of the view that voters know themselves who they want to vote for, and it is almost like some of the suggestions that we hear, us as Greens are always expected to step aside for whoever it is. It's always us that's expected to step aside. And I think it's almost quite offensive to not give that choice to a voter, to say that we're going to make that decision for you, so that you're not going to have certain options on the ballot. I can see maybe there might be a time when it would work, but it would have to be a really, really strong reason. Other than that, I think we need to put forward what we have and ultimately let voters decide, because voters in all their forms are intelligent enough and capable enough of picking the candidate that they believe in. And it's up to us to give them the options and for them to ultimately decide who they want to vote for.
How do we make a bigger impact in the media?
Whilst it's undoubtedly true that we don't get the same media attention as other parties, even parties that are smaller than us seem to get more attention. Actually, we know that certainly my background and a lot of the people I know don't consume their politics through mainstream media. So we might notice that we're never on Newsnight or we're never on Question Time or all the other things, but actually a lot of the people I know aren't watching them and they're not getting their information from them. So for me, I think we need to think hard about how we reach those communities and those people that aren't quite hearing our message yet. Social media comes into that. That's a really big piece. Again, the local party support role, I think, is probably could be developed more into helping local parties think about how they reach people on social media. And I think our message just needs to be a bit clearer. Zach's done a brilliant job at making it really clear what we offer, because it's not complex. Some of the things that we're offering is like common sense. And if we can message that the right way to people who need us, and that's people who are tired, exhausted, not always able to follow politics as closely as we all do. They're the voters that are waiting for us as a choice. And if we can make sure that our aims and our ambitions and our policies are straightforward and easy to understand, I think that will help to get our message across.
How do we attract more non-white members and voters to the Green Party?
In some ways, it feels as though like we don't have as much of a problem as attracting people who aren't white, but it's keeping them and making them feel like their experiences and their contributions are valid, and trusting people to tell their own story and to work in their communities, because the people who live in their communities tend to know their community best. And about being willing to be flexible and changing what we do to allow people to go out and work with their communities in a way that maybe we couldn't. I think one of our councillors in Greater Manchester, Hanif, is a really good example of he's worked so hard in his community, he's so well known, and what he did to get elected was phenomenal. Like, he worked so hard, he did things that I've never done before with being elected or the campaigns that we run. And I was like, it's vital for us to listen to what he did, because his experience is totally different to mine. And some things he did, if I did them, wouldn't work, and vice versa. But it was like, he's got all this experience that we really, really need to listen to. And there's loads of people like Hanif up and down the country. And I think that's the key thing. It's like knowing that I do think people are coming to us for a lot of different reasons, but we need to welcome them and make them feel valued and listen to what they're telling us.
How can the Green Party assure disabled people that we're listening to them?
I think we do a lot of really, really important work in our disabled groups and the policy working groups. I know that have done a lot of campaigning on some of the issues that we've seen just in the last year alone. So on personal independence payments, on the assisted dying bills. We're lucky to have a lot of people in the party who have that lived experience and who are willing to give their time to developing our policy and making it better. Thinking about our campaigning and how we reach those communities, things like where door knocking is great, because often we are literally going out and meeting people who are disabled, who might not ever get the chance to speak to people in local government or politics at all. So being able to go out and physically hear from them and speak to them is really important. However, I'm conscious that going back to Target to Win, not really there yet in terms of making sure that there is stuff that anybody of any ability can do, because there's still quite a heavy focus on actually going out and doing the physical work, which just isn't possible for everybody. And there shouldn't be that expectation that you have to do that to be involved, because as we've talked a bit before about, social media and all the rest of it, there's a lot of different things that people can do to contribute. And so I think it would be really good. Again, one of the things I'd like to do as local party support would be to speak to local parties who are struggling with that, to find different things to offer people and share that advice and guidance on how people welcome disabled people. Because as much as it's good going out and listening to people, actually we need more disabled people in politics. They're really underrepresented at decision making in local government and at a national level too. And so I think if we can make those tweaks to what we're doing to sort of make it a bit easier for people to come in and join us and contribute, then that would go a really long way to actually seeing positive change for people in our society who are disabled.
How should we handle transphobia in the Green Party?
I'm really clear. I'm really proud of our policies supporting our trans siblings. I firmly believe that trans men are men and trans women are women, and I want this to always be a safe place where people can be themselves. I don't think there's any room at all for any members who make this place somewhere where anybody feels threatened or unsafe. I think we have very clear rules and very clear guidelines to deal with people who break those rules. Something that worries me a bit is something I've seen recently in a couple of internal elections, where I've seen full slates of names of people, all labelled gender critical, all labelled transphobic, and I know that some of those individuals absolutely aren't. And an effect of that is that people are less likely to put their names forward to stand for election. And sometimes they're people from backgrounds that we really need to hear from. So I think we need to be a bit better at challenging that, because there seems to be sometimes unfair or false links between people who are suddenly sort of termed transphobic or gender critical when they're absolutely not. I think one thing that always disappoints me, and I've spoken about this in many forms in my role as a councillor in council, is the scapegoating of individuals. It seems to be whichever group they pick out of a hat that day to decide whose fault everything, where the blame lies. And we've seen it be trans people for too long. And there's absolutely no link or no evidence to gender-based violence or the genuine threats that women and girls face in this society every day. There is no link or suggestion that it's trans people that are causing that, and yet they seem to be the ones that are blamed for everything. And it really worries me that we just see that conversation be about trans people, when actually the conversation needs to be, who is it that's the real threat to women and girls in society, and what are we going to do to get rid of that? So I'm always proud to say that I very much support the trans people in our party, and I want more to join. And I think it needs to be a place where we can learn from each other. Like I've learned loads in some of the groups that I'm in about all different things, trans people's access to healthcare, like the problems that they face. I've learned all that because they've been kind enough to share that experience, and they're only here doing that because there's a lot of us who are making it a safe place for them, and I want to make sure it continues to be that safe place.
How important is social and economic class in politics?
Incredibly important. If we go back to COVID, although there's been loads of other times where it's obvious, and we think about the people who are making decisions, I do think the outcomes could have been a lot different if we'd have been having decisions made by people from a broader range in society. You know, we think about certain jobs, like bus drivers, for example, had a much higher rate of dying from COVID. And I really doubt there were many people in government who were either had been a bus driver themselves or like knew people that were. And whether that's cleaners or supermarket staff, like all these really vital roles that we have and we absolutely cannot live without, as we saw during the pandemic, are underrepresented at every level. I talk quite a lot, and I did it in council last week at one of our full council meetings. The fact that 2/3 of adults in the UK don't have a degree, and when we think about MPs, I think at the last count is about 85% of MPs have a degree, and 20% of those went to Oxford or Cambridge. Now, those figures aren't really representative of what society looks like. We're missing a huge group of people who've not been down that path. And it's that thing of like, if you don't see people in those roles, you never think that you can be one. And I think it's our time really to make sure that we have people in key positions in the Green Party who are showing that you do not need a particularly high level of academic education. Like you don't need to have a very deep understanding of politics or, you know, a degree in politics, anything like that. Those things are really helpful and really interesting, but they're absolutely not a necessity. Because I really just think we're not going to see that level of change unless we start bringing in people and having a full selection of people around the table making decisions.
What other issues are important to you?
I touched on it before, but gender-based violence is a huge issue. It's an epidemic that is not taken seriously at all in this country. Whether that's things like underfunding of refuges and safe spaces for women who are victims of domestic violence, what we teach in schools to young people about healthy relationships, the justice system, e.g. the discrepancy in sentencing for people. If you're a woman that's murdered by your partner in your own home, your partner is going to receive a shorter sentence than if they murdered you on the street. There's just this acceptance somehow that violence in the home is just a little bit more tolerable than anywhere else. That is something I think we can impact through our MPs at local government level, speaking a bit more about it in council. A huge issue is Palestine for so many reasons, not least the human cost that we are seeing. We're watching undeniably a genocide right in front of us, and we're watching our government almost ignore it. They're just pandering, I think, and not giving any sort of indication that what we're all seeing is going to end or they're going to condemn it. The Green Party's had a very strong record at calling it a genocide, at saying what we would do, the sanctions that we would impose on the Israeli government. We've done that for a really, really long time. And it's like no one else can see it in government. I think it's really interesting and stark to see things like how we've seen Palestine Action now described as a terrorist organisation in the same week that we saw groups of MPs dressed as suffragettes and celebrate that history, which is so important to me because I am really proud. There's a lot of roots of suffragettes everywhere, but in Greater Manchester particularly, we have a really proud history of the suffragettes. And I know a lot of the things that I can do as a woman now are solely down to the actions of those people. But my goodness, those suffragettes were feral. They were burning down buildings. They were doing so much that absolutely was condemned at the time, but is recognised now as having got us where we are. And I find it so upsetting and so appalling that the government can take strong action against a group that is campaigning to make people aware of a genocide. I'm sure I have to be very, very careful about how I say that and say that. I don't support Palestine action, but I support people taking action to highlight the injustice and the genocide that is currently taking place at the hands of the Israeli government. Another issue I really care about, and I'm working on a lot within the party, along with some other brilliant individuals, is gambling. There's a lot of things that kind of opened my eyes along the way about why we have such differences in a lot of the places that we live. I've lived in places where we've had like bookie after bookie after bookie on a high street in areas where like there's a lot of deprivation. And then I've lived in other areas where, you know, it's not as deprived and we have a longer life expectancy and there's no bookies. And I know people access gambling through more means than going into a high street betting shop, but the lack of regulation on gambling in this country is an absolute joke, and it's linked very much to political parties, successive governments doing absolutely nothing, doing the bare minimum, not recognising gambling as the public health crisis that it is, taking money from the industry itself. That's an area there's a really strong link to lobbying. And the harm that's caused to individuals and to a society as a whole just seems to be something that we accept. Obviously I would have come on to talk about my greyhounds anyway, but they've come up now. But that was how I really saw a lot of things about it, like the things that I saw. It's not just the harm to the animals; it's the harm to the humans. I've had people in my life who have suffered really badly with gambling addictions, and I just think the way that people are chewed up and spat out by gambling companies, with their CEOs taking millions and millions and millions in pounds in pay, is absolutely appalling. And I know if we had a Green government, that would look totally different. I'll come, as I said then, to my greyhounds, because even though our policy has changed, I'm really proud that we're still working to drive that issue up in Parliament. I've just spoken today with some of our MPs who are, there's an early day motion going in about greyhound racing, looking to ban it, because the stats that have come out recently have shown yet again that the industry is just failing to take any sort of steps to keeping greyhounds safe. Like, that's not something that they're interested in. So it's really like uplifting to see an issue that I've cared about for so long and that our members clearly care about too, we are actually able to make change on. And it comes back against that thing of like, that was the thing that when I joined the Green Party, that was the policy that I was like, this isn't quite where I want it to be. And it wasn't awful, it was just a bit dated really. And it was when I met Zach, and one of the first conversations he had with me, he does this so often with so many people. He's like, of course you can change that policy. Like, I'll back you. Like, we'll do it. We'll get it through. And it was a long process, as it should be. You know, there's a lot of steps to go through. But yeah, last year at conference, we stood up and we passed that policy. And now we're the first political party across England and Wales to call for a ban. And that's incredible, because that's our process and our democracy that's done that. And it just shows that we can be the ones pushing in Parliament. We have 4 MPs at the moment. We would absolutely love to have more, but just having a Green in the room sometimes can make the biggest difference. So yeah, and I will give you an exclusive here, Ed. Forrest, the greyhound that some of you may remember, me posting on social media and being absolutely adamant that Forrest was just going to be a foster, like he's just going to be a foster, blah, 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 blah. Well, of course, Forrest is now a permanent member of the family. So I'm now the very proud and very tired housemate to 4 greyhounds. So yes, that's an exclusive for you, Ed. You can you
Brilliant.
can you can splash that absolutely everywhere. I know that everybody will be dying to know what has happened to Forrest. So yes, Forrest the greyhound is staying, and he's looking for a new name, and he's probably going to be named after one of our wonderful lionesses. So I will be sure to make sure everybody finds out what his name becomes, probably after the final on Sunday.
Brilliant. So you've got room for a couple more, though, haven't you?
A few more greyhounds.
Yeah.
I think so. Sometimes I look at the front room and I'm like, I can see 2 spaces there,
Yeah.
and we don't like to see, beds go empty. And so yeah, I think I would definitely like to have more greyhounds. I don't know at what point it teeters into becoming an obsession that someone actually needs to step in and say, you need to stop growing greyhounds. Probably 4. Probably 4.
Maybe, yeah. Why do you think we should vote for you, and what will you do if you're elected?
I would I would love to have the honour of representing people at local party level at GPEX. I don't think the role, being blunt, is fully used to the best way it could be at the moment. The reason a lot of people encourage me to stand for this role is because, in many senses, I basically do it anyway. I've touched before on how I spend so much of my time, so much of my weekends going visiting so many local parties at varying levels, like parties that are just starting up with 3 or 4 members and are just getting out and starting to learn how they're going to do something, to much more established parties where they, are in control of their council and that kind of thing. Like it's a whole range of things that I've been able to do, and it's been brilliant for me because it's given me a lot of experience and knowledge that I've brought back to my own local party and that I've shared around us. But also it's given me that oversight really of seeing like what things keep coming up that people are struggling with, and so in many senses, like I feel as if I'm sort of already doing most of the role anyway. I just don't have that facility to feed it directly to the people on GPEX who are most likely able to do something with that information. I think it would be good to see more diversity at different levels in the party. As I say, I've become quite proud now of maybe not having the same educational level as a lot of other people, even though for a long time it's been something that I've maybe not been proud of or I've tried to hide. But I think it's important to have that at a level where we can start to challenge things that are quite confusing in the party. I think there's some things that, even though we do our best, like could be simplified and could be made a lot easier to understand, because sharing that knowledge to more people is going to make us stronger. And I think that is an important part of the role. I've shown that I can work really well with different people at different levels. I'm the group leader of my Green Party on Trafford Council at the moment. I've been a councillor for 2 years, and yeah, we work together in the best way that we can. And I think I've got those skills and that experience to take to GPEX and try and see how much we can do working together and focusing on things and trying to get change shifted, because that's what we as members want and need. We need to see an increase now in our movement so that we can get more people elected and reach more of the communities that need to hear from us.